And uh,
That is more or less what crossed Lucas' mind between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. With the late decision to kill Ben at the end of the first movie, he had painted himself in the corner. Who would train Luke now? To overtop the highness of Ben Kenobi, the idea came to Lucas to go the opposite way, create a very un-Jedi-looking master. This is how Min Yoda came to life in the first script, but keep in mind that he didn't have the look of the Jedi Master we know now. The only guideline was that he would be old and sort of crazy, while giving valuable lessons. As for his physical appearance, chief designer Joe Johnston worked on many sketches.
No one ever said, here's what Yoda has to be. Yoda could be anything. We sort of gravitated toward. It was almost like combining a leprechaun and a troll and a gnome and giving him this sort of quality of being very wise, you know. I think the one thing I remember George saying was he's 400 years old.
And here led the first risk that would haunt the filmmaker. It was a very bold move to use an odd-looking design as the main new character, who'd be in charge of all the lengthy exposition scenes. Joe Johnston then handed over to Ralph McQuarrie, who oriented the design towards the character we know, and also created his famous little house. Lucas gave to Yoda a final touch.
Help you again? Yes?
His speech pattern. It was a way to make him strange, but to keep him understandable, and that way the viewer would stay focused to decipher his essence. Lawrence Kasdan, writer on Episode 5, finest Yoda speaking. He actually envisioned it as an archaic speaking pattern, kinda the way Jedi from the Ancient Order would speak. As his design and his own planet were getting more accurate during pre-production, the issue of how it would be made raised. Yeah, how to create a believable 18 inches alien goblin. For a certain time, a disguised monkey was proposed, and if you think I'm making fun of you, just take a look at this picture, and welcome the idea that is probably the most hilarious fact about Star Wars. So monkey is a no-go. What do we have left? Child actor would cause production issues, and stop-motion techniques are not really adapted. How about a puppet? That would be a big change, and director Irvin Kershner was concerned that a puppet would look fake and destroy the movie. George Lucas shared the same feeling. He knew that gamble would have to be a groundbreaking achievement in terms of believability.
that was like a real leap, because if that puppet had not worked, the whole film would have been down the tubes. It just, it would have been a disaster if it had been a silly little Muppet, if it had been Kermit.
Hesitation and fear might have crossed his mind, but like Yoda says,
Do or do not. There is no try.
and at the time, if you wanted to do a super realistic puppet that's never been made before, there is one man to go search for advice.
The lovers, the dreamers, and me.
No, not him. Jim Henson, Muppet Show creator. He was the designer and puppeteer behind Kermit the Frog. Lucas met him during Star Wars production. They were actually studio neighbors when Henson was shooting the Muppet Show at the BBC. The two visionary craftsmen got along well, and Henson was very interested in trying to achieve the challenge that Yoda presented.
With puppets, a puppet generally you're working symbolically. A puppet is a symbol of whatever you're trying to portray.
Unfortunately, he wasn't available, since he had started the production of his own movie, Dark Crystal, using only puppets. So no Jim Henson, but Kermit the Frog is not alone. He has a friend who's equally famous, Miss Piggy. And the person behind Miss Piggy is no one else than Frank Oz. Oz got into production and worked with the famed makeup supervisor Stuart Freeborn. He was the one who created the man Aves from the prologue of 2001 Space Odyssey, and a pioneer in animatronics, which consists in equipping a puppet with mechanical and hydraulic elements to give its movement a realistic look. He and his co-workers, who are actually members of his family, worked on Yoda in a hurry, running late and forcing Mark Hamill to start the Dagobah shooting alone. He faced a lot of pressure, as he had to work in secret to come up with a good-looking creature.
I remember Stuart was under the gun, and it was very tense. Very tense. We had to get this thing done. We've got to start shooting with Yoda. And so while we're talking to him, I just had Yoda's head, and I was just playing with it, and I dropped and it cracked. So here we are, this is, and then Stuart said, I need a drink.
I swear, the pressure might have been terrible. I mean, how on earth could you be confident with this as a temporary puppet? Freeborn gave Yoda his unique expression, using himself as a guide.
It was his head. And I looked at him, and I looked at Yoda, and I realized what everybody was realizing and couldn't say. It was a self-portrait of Stuart Freeborn.
I looked in the mirror, and I thought, well, something perhaps a little bit amusing about my face.
And even though it's pretty wild to say to a friend that he looks like an 800 years old green frog, we gotta admit that Kushner was right. The makeup artist then found inspiration from another famous figure, Albert Einstein. Well, yeah, Yoda had to look intelligent, so who better than the most famous scientist in the world for that? On the 6th of August 1979, after more than 5 months of an exhausting shooting, Yoda came to life on the set of Dagobah. It had been carefully built on an elevated stage so that Frank Oz could manipulate it from under the ground. He was actually held by his team.
I had somebody doing the cables for the ears, and somebody else was doing the cables for the eyes, and somebody doing the left hand. So I had, me and 3 other people trying to bring one character to life, moving around. So I had to do it over and over and over and rehearse, and then say, okay, I'm ready, and let's shoot.
Center those eyes a bit.
To the right.
Yeah, just 1 second.
The eye this
There.
way.
That's a bit too far. There. That's it.
That's good, Graham. Okay, we'll go back into that. Ready.
An extreme coordination from the puppeteers was required, as they painfully progressed at the rate of 3 hours for each sentence. And Mark Hamill could barely hear Oz saying Yoda's lines from down there, so he had to memorize what he said to answer with the proper timing, not to mention the hard time when shooting in Yoda's extremely tight house. A few scenes of the training would be deleted from the final cut, showing Yoda throwing a steel stick that Luke had to slice with his lightsaber. And as the shooting progressed, something happened. The gamble had paid off, and Yoda was convincing. Frank Oz had done a wonderful job on giving Yoda such a believable behavior that Kirshner addressed to him instead of Oz, who was 5 feet down there. This was due to the extraordinary characterization that the puppeteer gave him. He revealed later that he had written a little biography of the Jedi Master, what he liked to eat, where he was from, to help him figure out how he would behave overall. For instance, he was careful to mark a little break after each movement to display Yoda's fatigue to the viewer. He also pushed forward his syntax to make it systematic in every Yoda's lines. For all those reasons, George Lucas fought for a long time with the Academy for them to consider Yoda as an actor and gave Frank Oz a nomination at the Oscar ceremony, without success.
We tried actually to get him an Academy Award nomination, and Screen Actors Guild said puppeteers aren't actors, which I thought was outrageous. A lot of acting started out as puppeteers in the old days, a few thousand years ago, before the Screen Actors Guild. But it's a great, brilliant performance, and it's acting. It's the best of acting.
Talking about interpretation, the marvelous scenes had one thing missing.
Oh, you will be. You will be. Sorry. Problems.
Yep, the voiceover. Oz had no guarantee that he would endorse Yoda's voice, but the way he performed made it an evidence in the end, so he went on recording his lines during dubbing sessions. Frank Oz came back on the next episode to manipulate Yoda again. For the occasion, Freeborn had made a new puppet that looked a bit different, with a greener tone, and actually finished it the very morning of the shooting, to the dismay of producer Howard Kazanjian. Anyway, he delivered a stunning performance once more that amazed Mark Hamill. Frank Oz then became a successful director himself, making both puppet and live-action movies. For the prequels, a new character would present another technical challenge on which the films would rely. A character who doesn't leave any fan indifferent. Yup, good old Jar Jar is actually probably an even bigger gamble from George Lucas. At the time, special effect character looked like this. So basing your movie on so many interactions with full computer-generated characters is far less risky. And Lucas had this perfectly in mind.
Jar Jar is a key to all this. We get Jar Jar working, because he's a funnier character than we've ever had in any of the movies before.
This time, it'd be the responsibility of digital artists from Industrial Light and Magic, created for Star Wars and which had become a state-of-the-art facility in special effects by the time of the prequels. A live actor, Ahmed Best, would provide a reference for Jar Jar's behavior, and then animators would recreate the Gungan within their computers, doing their best to make it as real as possible.
And I knew, of course, that Jar Jar was from a water planet. He'd never been to a desert planet before. So you put in things like he's squinting because of the sun, his feet are hot, and so you change the attitude of his walk, and the audience picks it up subconsciously that Jar Jar's in a different kind of a space. It's an extra level of acting and realism that an animator will bring to it.
And for episode 2, 3 years later, Jar Jar's technical prowess would give ILM some work, with the huge task of a digital Yoda. So, in a way, we could consider Jar Jar to be some kind of father to Yoda. Bet you never thought about it that way, right? Anyway, the need for computer-generated Yoda came from Lucas's will to show him fighting. Indeed, for Attack of the Clones, a little part of the script caused trouble. Ewan McGregor says it the best.
We're in Australia shooting the film, and I was turning the pages of the script, and I got to the end, and it says Yoda kicks Dooku's ass, and I thought, no, come on. How's that gonna work?
Yep, in order to kick Dooku's ass, Master Yoda, arguably the most iconic alien of all time, would have to cross the frontier between practical and digital effects. But was this even possible? Once again, it took George Lucas a lot of vision to make this leap of faith.
To be very honest with you, I was scared to death of this sequence and how I was going to pull this off, because this was the biggest risk in the whole movie was, could I make this realistic enough to make it believable, or would it just be this most ludicrous joke?
Different era, different techniques, but same kind of risk. And this time another genius was needed to bring this vision to life. Enter Rob Kalman, animation director. He decided to first go for a test to show to George Lucas, a reference, a proof of concept in a way. Kalman cleverly sticked very carefully to the episode 5's Yoda. Animators were scholarly watching and watching again the classic movie to find the right proportions to Yoda's computer-generated model.
Makes it grow.
Very good. Fantastic. Thanks.
Coleman and his team had passed the test, so the shooting took place without any puppets. Sometimes a Yoda model simply served as a reference to look at for the actors. And even for the wizards that created a believable Jar Jar in episode 1, anxiety still surrounded the computer-generated Yoda. I mean, just watch effects supervisor John Knoll trying his best not to look completely frightened on the set of that duel.
That'll be challenging. I mean, and it has to be handled well, because it does have the potential of being unintentionally funny. A 2.5 foot tall frog creature who's running around with these lightsabers. If not handled just right, it's going to look silly.
As for the animators, they were trying their best for the impossible to happen. It'd be the occasion for an amazing collaboration between two masters of the craft, Oz and Coleman, who discussed for a long time about Yoda's behavior. Frank Oz advised him to think about how tired Yoda would be, how his neck, his back, and feet would hurt so that Coleman could incorporate this in the workflow of his animators. Sometimes they went too far and too perfect, for instance overdoing his articulation, but then figured out that the way Oz used to manipulate Yoda's mouth, he could not pronounce vowels, so the animators went back to more basic movements. Just like Yoda has said,
You must unlearn what you have learned.
Same way as Freeborn used to take inspiration from himself when building Yoda, animators were using their own movement to decipher his anatomy. At each step of the work, George Lucas reviewed the sequences to orient them, the way a filmmaker would usually direct an actor.
Now this shot we've started to call the Widowmaker.
All right, I can't wait to see.
This one.
This one. Such an innocent looking
I
shot.
I know.
Such an innocent little thing. The Clone War has begun. Come on, guys. How hard is that?
The director has approved it a couple of times.
And then unapproved
And then unapproved it.
Begun. This Clone War has.
Oh, come on, guys! Now, that's pathetic, really. But I mean, he's not sad.
Look how sad he is.
Yeah, I know, he's really sad.
He's really sad.
He's sad. Yeah, poor little Yoda. Poor little Yoda. No, it needs to be. We've done it before. He's reflective. He's concerned. He's not angry.
Right.
It's just it's like the inevitability of it.
Right.
Well, it's like getting a performance out of a regular actor. It's just it takes a lot longer to get there.
And here's the core of George Lucas's vision about his CG characters. He envisioned them like real actors, genuinely concerned by their emotions. He's confident enough in the tools he created to use them for storytelling purposes.
One of the things I really like that George does is that he treats the digital characters like they were actors on the set. You'll see a number of shots where it's just Yoda's reaction, listening to people. He doesn't cut around them, he doesn't cut to them specifically, because he would normally shoot that way with real actors.
After months of work, Yoda was almost alive, but needed his original creator to bring in his voice once more. He thus recorded the Jedi Master's line, with Lucas proudly presenting what the animators had reached.
Exceptional skills he has.
Great.
How's the animation going, guys?
You know, I must say these guys have done a great job. I think you'll be proud.
Yeah, they don't whine like I do when I'm on the set, do they?
Yeah, they do. They do. They follow your every footstep. They were trying to see if they could find a little piece that has the animation of you being Rambo. It's not the finished, it's just the very first rough thing, but you do get a sense of what he looks like, and I think he's going to work out great. What do you think?
Pretty cool.
The new Yoda.
In a very class move, Frank Oz addressed a letter to Rob Kalman's crew to thank them for the groundbreaking achievement. Actually, Oz had witnessed the birth of digital characters 3 years earlier, as he was working on Yoda's puppet in the first episode. Yeah, animators had left Yoda to the domain of puppetry for that one, adding sessions of 2 shots. That one and that one for the trivia fans, a sort of test for the upcoming movies. The rest would be assured by Frank Oz, who was still as gifted as ever.
Always true there are. No more, no less. Now I forgot a master. Oh, that's a good take. Can I cut, George?
One day, Lucas showed him the works of his teams on Watto, a character that typically would have been a puppet years earlier. Oz answered with a warm but, let's face it, probably bittersweet tone.
That's great, George.
Indeed, a kind of irony can be ignored with George Lucas, who'd been defending Oz's arts, but later irreparably destroyed his job through the numeric innovations he carried. At the time, Oz was a busy director, but production knew how much he was important to Yoda and organized the shooting around Oz's schedule. For the occasion, the team worked on a new puppet to try to display a 30 years younger Yoda. He looked much more high on something than younger, to be honest. But Yoda was the only mistake, as the puppet department carried a revolution in animatronics, which was headed by Nick Dunman, who made its debut as a trainee on Yoda's original puppet back in 1979. How beautiful is that? Stuart Freeborn, his former master in a way, and by the time an absolute legend, visited the department to witness how much his heart had evolved in 2 decades.
No, that's very good indeed. My goodness, that's great. Radio control.
So, Stuart, we thought that we should do something to mark your visit. This is for you.
My goodness.
And it's from all of us.
Oh, that's
To say thank
fantastic.
you.
Oh, that is fantastic. That's incredible.
This sums up pretty well the video. Evolution of techniques with respect towards the predecessors. But in the end, is this evolution positive for filmmaking's sake? Everyone can make his mind about it. I'm just leaving you with the first person who put Yoda on screen.
Well, with the CGI Yoda, as they now are using him, he can do anything. And because he can do anything, there's no limit. And I think all art has to have limitations. And you have to work within the discipline of the resistance of that limitation. And to me, Luke creates the reality of Yoda. He accepts Yoda as a real, living thing. Therefore, we tend to accept it as a living thing. At least this is what I was thinking. With CGI, you don't have that. The little creature is put in afterwards. There's a blank part on the screen, and Mark will be talking to a blank part, and then later, months later, a little Yoda is put in. I prefer it my way.